So our partners, our customers now can do that migration with direct transfer, not requiring that admin token, and still get their attributions, still get all the features they would get before with that old file-based transfer. So without further ado, I will kick it off to Michael. Michael Leopard, take it away.
Thanks, Lynn. I've got some slides I'm going to share in a second. One other thing too, and we're done with the direct transfer presentation. Vamsi Panapali is also on the call, is going to do a quick PSA on some other delivery kits we have available for partners to use. So I'll share my screen and we'll get going. All right, can you all see the presentation?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Yeah, so like Glenn said, this presentation is on using Congregate with direct transfer. I'm Michael Leopard. I'm Senior Practice Manager for Professional Services here at GitLab. I've been here about 5.5 years. I've been here along the whole process of building out Congregate, and it's their tool of choice for migrating data. Quick agenda for this short slide deck. I want to talk about what direct transfer is. I want to talk about what Congregate is. And I want to talk about what's recently changed in Congregate that's enabled some better flexibility with migrating customers to GitLab.com and other places. And then we'll end it with a short demo. So yeah, direct transfer is a new migration method built out by our import and integrations team. They started developing it back at GitLab 13, so that's about 3 years ago. Reached general availability in January of 2023. Direct transfer differs from our older, now deprecated, but we still use it, file-based method, in that there's no need to generate an export file to upload to a destination. This saves space when we're doing a migration, and it also just saves time because we don't have to worry about triggering an export, getting it finished, downloading it, and so forth. The biggest benefit, like Len mentioned, for direct transfer over file-based imports is that an admin token is not required to retain user attributions when we're importing via direct transfer. However, there's still a requirement that public emails need to be set on both the source and destination to retain that user attribution. So how does it differ from the other importers? Direct transfer functions very similarly to our existing GitHub and Bitbucket server importers in that it effectively streams the data from the source to the destination. It's kind of an old term we use, but that's more or less how it works. There's a direct connection required between the source and destination to make sure the data can move across. That's not a requirement with our file-based importer because we can basically trigger an export, get the data, and import it somewhere else without a direct connection needed. The deprecated file-based importer does require creating an export of the project or group and then importing it via file upload. By the way, stop me if you have any questions as we're going through this. This is a fairly short deck, and then we'll get into a more in-depth demo. So what is Congregate? So Congregate is a tool maintained by the professional services team here at GitLab, and it orchestrates the end-to-end process of migrating an organization to GitLab through the use of various APIs, as well as our built-in importers. How does it work? So there's 3 major steps, 4 major kind of phases to using Congregate. First, we list data. So this is us pulling down a snapshot of metadata that we store in Mongo and a couple of JSON files from the source. We put into 3 main types of assets: users, groups, and projects. We're using GitLab nomenclature here. We figure out how to kind of convert some of the other terms from other tools like Bitbucket and GitHub, and we just all set it up into GitLab specific naming. Once we have the snapshot of the metadata, we select specific users, groups, and or projects to stage for a migration. Think of this like when you're making changes in a Git repo and you've made the changes, you then need to stage them for a commit, and then you would go ahead and commit the change. That's the same concept here. We're kind of creating a staging ground so we know what exact data we're going to migrate. Once we have all the necessary data staged for a migration, we go ahead and start migrating the data. This is the specific stage where we use our built-in importers. Within the migrate step, following the import, we have what are called post-migration tasks. This is where Congregate comes back into play to migrate any additional data that our importers either don't currently support or will never support due to other specific business choices or product choices. This includes CI/CD variables, Docker container registries, merge request approvers, environments, whole list of other things. You can see that in our features matrix that sits in the Congregate code base itself. You can check that out on GitLab.com. So what has recently changed in Congregate? So with the new release of version 7.0 that we released last Friday, 3 major changes were made to it. So for those of you who have used Congregate before, it's a very CLI heavy tool. We spin up a single Docker container and we just start going through the stages I just talked about in the last slide, all through a CLI. This new release has added the ability for us to do a migration all through a UI that's served up through the Congregate Docker container. And originally, we've had a UI around for years where we can stage, but we couldn't do listing or migrating. With direct transfer enabled, we can now conduct entire migration end to end through the Congregate UI. Some two other kind of backend changes we've made is the introduction of supervisor D, which is our supervisor CTL command. This was first introduced with our air gap migration support. It effectively just keeps Congregate and 2 other processes long running, so we can continue to handle all of this process asynchronously. For those of you familiar with GitLab CTL, it's effectively the same kind of concept. So if we need to make any config changes, we just got to restart and do all that. For the sake of this demo, I'm not going to dive into it too much. Just want to kind of cover that that's a new kind of architectural choice. And then the third piece is the asynchronous job queues. So when we're going through the CLI approach, effectively we run a single long running terminal, watch the logs as we're migrating data, and we kind of just have to keep it open, or we throw it in a screen or something to let it run. With direct transfer and first appearing with our air gap migration support, we now utilize an asynchronous job queue for migrations via direct transfer or the air gap migration. So basically just no need for keeping a terminal running for hours on end. And with that, we're going to jump into a demo. And I wanted to show kind of the quick setup here. Source is going to be a GitLab self-managed instance. The destination is going to be a GitLab.com top-level group. And then the assumptions are, I'm going to omit users because ideally in this situation, when we are moving customers to GitLab.com through direct transfer without an admin token, we need to utilize skim provisioning. So I set up a group that's just got a couple other PSEs in the team, and we're just going to kind of wave our hands saying that we've migrated the users already. We're going to focus on groups and projects. Any questions so far while I pull up the other screens? Okay. All right, that's a lot of extra windows. Let me move all that over. Can you all see 2 GitLab screens?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay. Ran through this a couple times. We gotta make sure this group's empty. Sweet. This is the destination that we are going to be migrating to. So let's walk through the Congregate UI real quick. So this is what the UI looks like. For those of you who have ever tried to use it for staging data, it should look fairly familiar. It's a pretty minimal UI. The biggest changes here would be the action section. So there's kind of the 3 major stages, as well as a couple other links on the side. So from the home page, we can see a couple of things off the bat of what we have configured and kind of where we're sitting at it at the moment. We haven't run a list, so we need to retrieve data. But we do see that Congregate is currently configured to migrate from GitLab, the specific source, to GitLab destination, which is gitlab.com. So I'm going to kick off a list. We just click this and let it run. The way this runs, this kicks off a handful of jobs in the background, which we can see from the task queue. So if I'll just refresh the page real quick. We should be able to see this number continue to go up. Basically, as we retrieve data, we're just sending it to a job queue to process it. And it runs by default number of CPUs that we would have for concurrency. I ramped it up to 6, and that should be okay for this demo. While this is running, I want to look at go through the settings page real quick. So this is kind of a new more just for it's a nicety really. This is how we can see the configuration setting of listing's been complete. Sweet. The setting for the Congregate configuration. Notice that this is a pretty sparse config for getting direct transfer to work. It's excluded another setting called the export section because we have to worry about files. But the biggest piece here is that if we have direct transfer set to true, then the rest of the UI work should function no problem. Another thing to keep in mind, this settings section does not include any tokens. That's just been scrubbed out before we ever serve this data up to the UI. So we can see listings complete. We've got 64 projects, 49 groups, and 14 users that we could stage. I'm going to stage a single group that contains a handful of subgroups and projects. So that specific group I'm looking at is the seed testing group here. We're going to migrate all of this through direct transfer. So I'm going to go over to staging, going to go to groups just to make it a little bit easier. And I'm going to grab seed testing when I find it. There it is. Stage it up. We now see that we have 34 projects staged, 5 groups staged, and then 4 users. So we've gone through the list, we've gone through the stage. Now we're going to move on to migrating. Notice there's a couple of parameters in both listing and staging, or sorry, listing and migrating. This is just to mimic the command line flags we have. Listing is full parity with the CLI. Migrating is not. It's a little more sparse at the moment. I'm going to say we'll skip users in this migration. Click migrate and notice we're running a dry run. By default, you have to explicitly say you are going to commit the migration. If you just click migrate, it's going to just say this is the data we plan to migrate. So we see the destination namespace is set to dtdemo010. That's here on gitlab.com. And then just some extra data with regards to what we plan on migrating, calling out some subgroups and projects. That all looks good to me. So I'm going to go back in, skip users again. I'm going to commit it. And I'm going to click migrate. So what this is doing, this is the one piece that we're going to improve in a future release. We need to keep the this page open until this starts to show specific jobs running. This is just the way direct transfer works. We've sent an API request out to gitlab.com. If I refresh this page, we should see a group show up. Yep, so the group's there, but we're waiting for every entity to be put into the queue on GitLab to start monitoring every individual project that's migrating. This changes a bit from how we did it before, but basically we just need to wait till we see a table, and then once that shows up, we're kind of good to navigate away from this page. Now, this can take a few minutes as we're migrating data, and Congregate doesn't fully start monitoring until every entity has been created. So for example, we can see on the GitLab side, we're already building out groups, we're already building out projects, but Congregate's going to wait until the full list of entities has been queued up for GitLab to import. Couple other notes, just checking through the notes I had. So this is all running on a T3 small instance in AWS. This is a pretty slim setup. It's not super performance heavy. I want to highlight a couple of projects that we are planning to, or that we have migrating at the moment. So 2 things. We've got a seed testing project with issues. We should see admin accounts, in this case, fail to retain users, but we should see Petter's account come up. If I go to issues, that should actually be there by now. Interesting, that one didn't work. That is the magic of a demo. I'll show a merge request in a second. If we look at the merge request, we can see admin, and Nikki. And in this case, we can see admin account rolled up to me as well. In the merge request case, it went to Nikki there for the user attribution. That should be a public email thing. I think Petter should be part of this group, but I may have missed adding him. I'm just using the free account here. We can also check in Flower to see, this is the dashboard view of Celery. So this is just kind of showing how many jobs we've processed. And yep, going back here, we can see that we're now watching imports run. as they go through, as direct transfer finishes up for each project or group that finishes, we run post migration tasks as well. While this runs, does anyone have any questions? This is going to take 10 minutes or so to get all the data over. Does anyone have any questions for this new workflow?
I guess if no one has questions, like what's next on the roadmap, I guess, Michael, that I'm interested in with 17 and going forward.
Yeah, the next major features we're working on rolling out will be some additional support for packages. So at the moment, we support Docker container registries, Maven packages. We actually have a community contribution in for generic packages that will be merging in sometime next week, ideally. And then we're moving on to NPM and PyPy. So basically just trying to build out a little more, a better feature parity with all the different bits of data that you can store in your GitLab project.
And then I know you were saying file transfer is kind of deprecated, but we still use it. So maybe it's good for the group to know like when we would use direct transfer versus file based because we're not fully getting rid of the old method.
Right, that's a good call out, Bouncy. That we still will use file based in events where if there isn't an option for a direct connection between GitLab instances, we'd still rely on file based. There is another piece to the roadmap is there's a plan to support every source system that we currently migrate through the CLI through the UI. Right now, we're just limited to direct transfer in the UI. But that'll include file based. We'll roll that into the UI as well. But yeah, if there's no direct connection, we can use we'll use file based. If there is an entire air gap between instances where we can't have a single congregate node, but we need 2 nodes, we'd still use file based. But past that, we'll be transitioning more to using direct transfer pretty much by default. So yeah, that's a good call out, Bouncy.
Yeah, no problem. I promise Michael didn't pay me to ask these questions. I'm genuinely curious.
I
Are there
disbelieve.
are there limits to like the projects groups users?
In what way?
Is it an API limit? Is there can you just stage as many as you need for a migration? Do you like how does it get broken out into the different waves when you do this in an engagement?
Ideally, we'd stick to the same way we've set up waves before, where we'd still break it up into chunks of data within the instance. One thing that a major part that changes is we basically make one API call out per per wave now to trigger direct transfer. And then once that returns and we get all the entities back and we know what to track, that's when we start to kind of pull GitLab for the status. Whereas before with file based, we trigger an export and import request per project or group. Now it's we make a single direct transfer API call with the full list of all of our stage data, and then we start to import everything accordingly. And then we just monitor at that point, waiting for those to be finished. So like we can see here, this is the primary task that's watching for everything else to finish. And then these other 5 tasks are waiting for an import to be done. And I think we're polling at every 10 seconds right now. That is configurable. I was just using defaults for this. Was there another question that someone was going to ask? So I think this is going to run for a few more minutes. We just jumped into post migration for these. If y'all don't mind, I want to shift gears for a second so Vamsi can talk about some other new features or new things we've released from practice management. don't mind me putting you on the spot there, Vamsi.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I don't have a full demo or anything to show. This is more in the lens of a PSA in general, while some of our partners are on. But practice is aware, and we're making a concerted effort, especially this upcoming quarter, to build out delivery kits for each one of the offerings that we have for our engagements. So we've spent a lot of time over the last 3 to 6 months cleaning up a lot of the scoping and the pricing and the wording around our engagements, and making sure that we're selling the right things at the right price that are taking the right amount of time to make sure everything's in sync. But what we haven't gotten to as much is creating proper run books and delivery kits for each of these service offerings. And so the goal is to make sure an engineer picks up one of the, or is assigned one of the offerings, and they're working through an engagement. They don't have 10, 12 different implementations of the same engagement, right? We want to create a centralized standard or repository. And so y'all might be aware of our delivery kit group within the professional services automation group in GitLab. I'm showing you through the lens of a couple of delivery kits I created, but we're going to start creating really detailed delivery kits for each of the offerings that should take you step by step through the engagement, what's expected of you, what you have to deliver, how to do so, and then just topics and things you may need to cover depending on said engagement. So I wanted to start off, these are going to be made public and available to partners, so you should be able to pick it up, contribute back to it if there's something missing. But the idea is it should be as simple to follow as possible. So the first two I've created were the DevSecOps and CI/CD workshop delivery kits. The names are a little misleading. They're more than workshops. I know it sounds like, hey, it's a workshop. This is what our essays do. This is what anyone who demos our GitLab features do, but it's not really a workshop. The idea for both of these service offerings are they're meant for customers who have no experience in CI/CD or security, respectively. So they have or GitLab security, I should say. So they're coming in blank, and before they're ready to commit to like a full-on hands-on engagement where we're touching code, we have these two advisory engagements for them to kind of understand what GitLab CI is or what GitLab security is through a demo project we have. So in the CI/CD case, I have a demo project that runs through a bunch of different CI components where they can build their first GitLab CI YAML file, containerize their application, run some testing and some security scans, and doing a deployment to AWS. I think it's just an EC2, all in an automated pipeline so they can kind of get a taste of what that would look like in GitLab. And then similarly for security, it's to show, how does our security dashboard work? How does vulnerability remediation and setting up security policies and things like that work in the GitLab setting? So the idea is, again, we have a project you can use to show off some of these features, but that's not the end all be all, right? The goal is not to teach a customer every little bit and piece of CI/CD and security. We have trainings to do that for the end users. Instead, it's to kind of show them, hey, this is what we can do. And then while that only takes 1 to 2 days of the engagement, the rest of the engagement is supposed to be structured as, you can think of it as a discovery or a road mapping session. And that's when we start to understand, the customers, in this case, CI/CD setup right now. What are they using today? What tools are they using? What is their process when they commit and deploy code and release? Get an understanding of their environment, and then we take that and we kind of plan and advise them on how they can transform that process to best utilize GitLab as they start their adoption. So if you scroll down even like through down the delivery kit, there's steps for the demo to show them how it works, but then there's a whole discovery and road mapping session with like lists of topics you're going to likely want to discuss with your customer and talk through, because at the end of the offering, the deliverable we're providing, as it's an advisory engagement only is a documentation and like a low level diagram of like how their systems would be set up in GitLab. And that's usually not necessarily a lift and shift. It's going to be some sort of transformative method. And so they're broken out into CI/CD and security specifically because enterprises usually have different teams owning the different pieces of the business. And so I just wanted to highlight, I know they're called workshops and it's not just running through an app, but there is some deeper discussions behind to help customers understand how they can begin the adoption into GitLab. But it is an advisory engagement. So we're not writing and building things in the customer environment. It's just like a detailed discovery road mapping session. And it's not a training and it's not hands-on. So if y'all see that, that's what those offerings are out there if you get assigned to them. And these are examples of 2 delivery kits that are now public and, in my opinion, pretty detailed, and they should have all the information that they need, but accepting contributions as always, and we're going to be continuing to build out more delivery kits in the future for all of our other engagements. I think that's all I had to say. We do have offerings for the longer term CI/CD and security engagements that are hands-on. Working on building the equivalent delivery kits for those as well, and I'll announce it to y'all when those are good to go and public. These are kind of the fixed price advisory engagements. Any
Hi,
questions?
MC.
Yeah,
I
go
do have a
ahead.
question. Hi, everyone. My name is Jeremy Clinton. I run our services at Adaptivist. Nice to meet all of you. So regarding the delivery kit, so our teams are, we do a lot of GitLab projects, and in terms of the contributions, because we've got kind of our runbooks and these things as well, how would you want us to contribute? Like, what would be the best way to make sure that information is flowing in your teams and making sure like there's something cohesive in terms of, or consensus of like how we want to deliver these things?
Yeah, I think they're the standard way of if issues or merge requests would work. These are public projects. I think you should have access to it, but you can tell me if you don't. Otherwise, we have a bunch of Slack. I know we have the Adaptivist Slack channel that you guys can use if it's just like a quick fix or calls. I think really any way you can contact us is the best. I think the best method in general is if it's documented in some sort of document like an issue or merge request, we can look at it, and that way we can easily put it into the delivery kit if there's gaps or something that will help you.
All right, what I'll do, I'm not sure that all of my folks actually have access to all your stuff, but I know we obviously have the Slack, so maybe we'll start from there, and then once I make sure the team has access to all the GitLab documentation of those kind of things, then we can start putting those things in there. If that's actually the case, if that's your preferred method.
Sure, that's a good question though. Glenn, Brian, I'm just curious, do we have a normal like process for partners contributing back or something? Is it like, am I misspeaking here?
No, ideally it's I'll jump in for a second, but ideally it's so we have kind of 2 main levels of how we like build out delivery kits. When a delivery kit becomes public, which should be available to like anybody with access to GitLab.com, if there's any typos found or better documentation we can put in, we'd approach it kind of in the same way of like a open source contributor. So like could fork the repo, make some changes to the markdown file, and make a merge request. But if y'all are having access issues, we can definitely take a look at that, because we have kind of varying levels of, we have some other delivery kits we're building out, but until we think they're ready for you all to consume, we keep them private. So they should be, the 2 kits that Vamsi just talked about should be publicly accessible. If not, we can look into that and see if we can get you all access.
Yeah, I haven't checked it to be completely fair, so I'll get back with the team, make sure that that's actually the case. But if not, I'll certainly give that feedback back.
Totally fine. This is also super new, so wasn't expecting you to have looked through it anyways. But this is definitely something we're, the practice team here is going to be working on moving forward. So we'd like to make more of these delivery kits, and we're just starting our journey, but it's always best to just, iterate, show you guys what we have so far, and then just keep building them out. And like Michael said, eventually we'll make them public when they're detailed enough and we feel they're ready enough to actually be helpful and not just confusing.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Bossy.
Any other questions before I throw it back to Michael? I'm excited to see the end state of his demo. All right, Michael. It's all you. You're on mute.
Yep, I'll share my screen again. Okay, everything's moved back. Okay, you can all see the two GitLab screens.
Yes, we can.
Awesome. So on the left is our source, on the right is our destination to GitLab.com. I want to call out the reason why it looks like Petter's name did not show up, sorry, on the issues. Petter has a profile on GitLab.com that is private. So while he has a public email, it seems that the profile also needs to be public as well, during the migration at least. One of the examples I want to show, so a couple things their importers don't include would be things like CI/CD variables and environments. So I just want to show, this is a super basic example here. But if I go on the source on the left and I go into the destination on the right and just like expand our variables just to see it, there's a single variable, it's hello world. And on this side, we can also see hello world has come over as well. Same with our environments. If I want to just see it, again, it's a test environment. Look at it on this side, test environments come over. So that shows that we've got direct transfer integrated, and it's also wired into our existing post-migration tasks that we've had in Congregate for years at this point. So that just kind of shows the end state. Some other improvements we'll make kind of just down the line, no specific deliverable or release date for it, is just some better feedback in the UI to say, here's what's done, here's what's migrated. We do have diff reports that are outside of the UI at the moment. We want to get those pulled into the UI in the future as well. Yeah, and then once it finishes up, it kind of enables you to stage more data, migrate another run, do what you got to do there, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Still can follow logs if you want to watch the nitty-gritty details of it. That's still available from the Docker container itself. And one more thing to call out when we're setting up a migration this way, there is a different, we don't use a single Docker container, we use a Docker compose file, and that's available in our Docker release folder in the code base. So yeah, I think that's it for the demo. We got all the data over, moved it over with user attributions outside of the one private profile. Are there any other questions with doing a migration to .com with direct transfer?
No, this is super cool. Thanks for showing us, Michael.
Yep, no problem. All right, Glenn, I think I'll hand it back to you for us to close out.
Great. Any other questions, comments from anyone out there? Great. I know this has a little bit of assumption. I'm familiar with Congregate as well, so I will also add the link to the Congregate workshop in the documentation, just so folks can dive into that before diving directly into a direct transfer piece. Otherwise, if you have any questions, just drop a comment in the docs. I think everyone should have at least commenter access, and we'll try to get those answered for folks. I think we're done. Otherwise, Vamsi, you said your piece. Michael, you're all good. Any other questions? Excellent. So again, the later afternoon session is the same content, just different crowd. So thanks all for joining us today, and to our partner folks, thank you for joining us on this. I hope this is helpful for you, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how many folks can dive in with direct transfer.
Yeah, thank you. Love the content. Thanks, everybody.
Take care, folks. Bye.
So, yep.
Excellent, folks. So welcome to the Jan 26, 2024 GitLab PS Enablement Session 2. Today, we're going to have a demonstration by Michael on Congregate and direct transfer. Direct transfer is great, getting it integrated, finally getting that feature into Congregate that opens up migrations without an admin token. So a lot easier for customers to self-serve and get that attribution that before only came from the admin token, and also now opens up the opportunity for our partners, many of whom are joining us today, to do those Congregate migrations to our .com or our SaaS environments and keep that attribution without the need for that admin token. So really happy to get this integrated, really happy to not have to use that admin token anymore. That'll be a load off of all of our brains, I know, to not have that sitting out there. So we'll let Michael do that demo, and in between bombs, he might talk to us a little bit about some CIDC workshop and DevSecOps workshops PSA. So Michael, I will hand it off to you.
All right. Thanks, Glenn. Let me find the browser for it. You'll see the presentation. Cool. All right. So hi, everyone. I'm Michael Leopard. I'm a Senior Practice Manager for Professional Services here at GitLab. And this presentation is on using Congregate with direct transfer. So this is a pretty short slide deck before we jump into a demo, but just wanted to kind of cover. We're going to briefly talk about what is direct transfer, what is Congregate, what's recently changed in Congregate to enable this new functionality, and then we'll jump into the demo. So yeah, direct transfer is a new migration method. It's been built out by our import and integrations team. It started, development for it started back at GitLab 13, so we're talking 3-ish years ago, and it reached general availability last January. So it differs from our older and now deprecated file-based GitLab importer, and that there's no need to generate a project export file to upload to the destination. It also differs in its admin token requirement. That's the biggest benefit outside of speed, is the no longer needing an admin token to retain user attributions. However, there's still some requirements to keep user attributions around. We discovered this in the demo earlier today, where it's public emails and public profiles need to be available on the source and destination so that user attribution can still go through while we're migrating. And how it differs from other importers as well, direct transfer is a lot more similar functionally to our GitHub and Bitbucket server importers, and that the direct connection is created between the source and destination, and we stream the data from the source to the destination. Whereas with the file-based, we'd send an API request, trigger a project export, which would put together an archive file on the source file system, then we'd download it to the Congregate VM, and then we'd upload that file to the GitLab destination, and then it would kick off the import process. So overall, it's a much more efficient way of importing data, as long as you have a direct connection in place. So with that, what is Congregate? If we've got this great import tool, what does Congregate do? On top of that, it's a tool that we maintain here in GitLab Professional Services, and it orchestrates the end-to-end process of migrating an organization to GitLab through the use of various APIs and our built-in importers. So to kind of zoom in on that a little bit, where our importers will import groups and projects, there's nothing that specifically like migrates users. There are some ways now to get users onto a GitLab instance, but this Congregate will help to, orchestrate from start to finish for users, groups, and projects. So for those who have not used Congregate before, here's the kind of quick steps to using it to migrate data. So first step is list. So we run a command called Congregate list. It pulls down a snapshot of metadata from a source instance, and then we will put that into 3 different types of asset categories: users, groups, and projects. That's using GitLab nomenclature. So for those familiar with like Bitbucket or GitHub, it would be a Bitbucket project turns into a GitLab group, a GitHub org turns into a GitLab group, and so on and so forth. This gets us kind of just the most minimal amount of data we need to know how to orchestrate migrating data from the source to the destination. So once the list is complete, we'll move on to the staging phase of the process. So from there, what we do is we select the specific users, groups, and or projects to stage for a migration. The way you could also think about this, if you're familiar with, which I hope if you're familiar with using Git to make changes to your source code, as you make changes to a file, it's untracked. Once you add it, you're staging it for a commit. And then once you commit it, it's stored in the Git database. Similar concept here with how we stage data. Once we have the data staged, we move into the migration step. So we run a Congregate migrate, And that's where we go ahead and start migrating the data. And this is where our built-in importers directly in GitLab are utilized. There's two kind of sub-steps to the migrate stage, which is we use our built-in importers, and then anything that our importers don't support moves into a post-migration task. And that's something we handle directly in Congregate, which we would use by interacting with various APIs to move that data. So there's some data that our importers don't support at the moment, or probably may not support ever, but we still need to move it over for customers to retain data parity. So that would include things like CI/CD variables, Docker container registries, merge request approvers, and environments. And a full list of that can be found in our feature matrix in the Congregate documentation. So what has changed in Congregate recently? Last Friday, we released Congregate 7.0. Congregate 6 was the last major version we had. We released, I think, 23 releases to it. It was originally created and released in 2020, and then we kind of just kept maintaining that specific version of Congregate up until last week. We still support the old version, by the way. It's really just we implemented some more features to it. So the three biggest changes to Congregate in 7.0 would be UI-based migrations. So when you use direct transfer in Congregate, you can conduct the entire migration end-to-end through a UI, which we have never supported before. It's primarily a lot of CLI commands, and now you can do the entire thing just from the comfort of your browser. These two other pieces actually started to show up in later versions of 6x. Just kind of behind the scenes as we were building out support for our air gapped migration support. So that would be, we now use Supervisor D to manage the state of multiple long-running services in Congregate. If you're familiar with GitLab CTL, it's kind of the same concept. It spins up Congregate, it spins up Celery, which is our job queue, and it spins up a utility called Flower, which monitors the different jobs that have been sent to Celery. And then the last piece would be the asynchronous job queues that we started to implement. So now, instead of us kind of waiting for a single process in a terminal and waiting for it to finish or throwing it into a screen, now we can just kick it off in the UI and then let it run its course. And then when it's done, we can find out from the UI and from Celery and Flower. Any questions so far before I jump in the demo? All right, I'm going to switch my screen share. All right, and you all see Congregate on the left and GitLab on the right.
Yep.
Awesome. Close that out. Okay, and yep, so from here, this is kind of the clean slate of the Congregate UI. Sorry, too many windows to monitor on the other screen. So for those of you who are familiar with the Congregate UI, this should look kind of similar. The difference is this action section, which contains the main three stages or main three phases we have in Congregate. This is built into all of our Congregate containers. And so from here, we can kind of do the three main phases of Congregate. So what I'm gonna do first, I want to kick off a list. We've got no data here, even though we are configured to pull data. So I'm gonna click list. This is gonna run in the background for a bit. While that's running, I wanna work from the bottom up on the sidebar to show some extra information. So we can also review settings in Congregate directly from the UI. It's any non-sensitive data. So that would be like, specifically, we can see, direct transfer set to true, which makes this all possible here. We can see what we're connecting to for Mongo and Redis. We can see what the source and destination are set up to. And for those who have used Congregate in the past, this config probably looks a little sparse compared to how we have set up configuration files before. So direct transfer makes it a lot easier to simplify some of the processes. We can also see listing just was marked as complete from the little toaster in the bottom. But yeah, this just shows like quick setup of like, what am I connecting to? What's the ID that I'm working with? Who's the import user? Stuff like that. Anything that's in the Congregate config that's not a token would show up here. The next piece would be the task queue. So this is just an extra Python library that will spin up watching jobs process. So should have flipped over to that while it was running the list. We'd see it kind of increment up as it's listing data. We'll check back on that again when the migrate kicks off. If I go back to the homepage, we can now see that the total project groups and users has increased. We now have a snapshot of the test GitLab instance that we're working with. And then we can move on to staging data. So I'm going to stage a single group that contains a handful of groups and projects. And then we'll go from there. So that's the wrong one. Yep. So we stage that data. If we go back to the home page, we can see all the projects that have been staged, all the groups that have been staged, and then any users. So from here, we can move on to migrating the data. One thing I forgot to mention before, with listing, we have full parity with the listing CLI command and all the flags. With migrating, we do not. We will be adding more optional parameters over time as we cut new releases of Congregate 7. I'm going to skip users for this migration, and I'm going to click migrate. That automatically by default runs a dry run. This isn't migrating any data. It's really just getting together a payload of like what the expected request is going to look like going to the destination. And then before I kick off the full migration, if you at any point you're not sure, or you just want to see what this Congregate node is configured to do, at the bottom of the migrate card, it says it's currently configured to migrate from GitLab with a link to the instance to GitLab with a link to the instance. So if it's Bitbucket, GitHub, so on and so forth. So I'm going to skip users. I'm going to commit. That's to say we are going to start migrating data, and we kick it off. So this is the one part that kind of takes a little bit and is not as asynchronous as the rest. It's just a long-running API call where we are triggering the direct transfer request, which will kick off every other subsequent task. So we can already see if I refresh the page, this is already showing up, but this is still saying migration in progress. What's happening here is, and this is something we'll improve in the future, what's happening is it's waiting for every entity, which could be a group or a project, to be queued up to migrate. So GitLab is still processing through the data of what's on the source. It hasn't fully found all the entities yet to queue up for a migration. So this is going to take about 10 minutes. In the meantime, I'm actually going to kind of take a pause here so we don't just keep staring at a loading screen. I wanted to hand it over to Vamsi to discuss some other new features we have from the practice management org.
Yeah, sure. But before I jump in, Michael, I think Jordan put a couple questions in the chat. I don't know if you can
I'm
see.
sorry, Jordan, I didn't see.
No, you're good. You're good. I can read them out to you if that's easier as well. I know you're sharing.
Let's see. Okay, no changes to the Congregate conf right. Thoughts about managing and setting up conf file from UI. No major changes really to like get direct transfer to work. It's really you just set this to true. And yeah. What do you mean by thoughts about managing setting up conf file from UI?
So when we do, well, I think it was Congregate configure in the CLI, like
Mhm.
instead of doing it from the CLI, could we have like just an bunch of input fields here?
Yeah, totally. I want to get to that point. I want to bring that functionality back in and have it handled through the UI.
Okay, yeah. And does this new UI work when we're doing non-direct transfer? I'm assuming yes.
It doesn't right now because the way we're firing it off, it's sending off a bunch of there's like a whole API endpoint setup that we aren't using with the file base right now. But that is the plan in the future. We're gonna expand it, all the support, so all of the CLI methods can be done in the UI.
Would it be good to show source? We show the source host name and oh wait, never mind. I'm looking at destination. I was looking for the parent path, but I was looking at source. So okay, it's there.
Okay. Nikki, for direct transfer, the customer source needs to be able to connect to GitLab.com. Yeah, a direct connection is required. So what'll happen is if you'll trigger the direct transfer request from the destination needs to be able to reach back out to the source. So there needs to be some form of it needs to allow at least ingress from GitLab.com or whatever the source would be, or the destination would be.
So
where
we
can we
only need ingress on the source.
That's what I think we need. I ran into some weirdness with like security groups yesterday with when getting all this stuff set up, and I think it is just ingress. As long as like our test instance, as long as this can retrieve a request from GitLab, I think it should be okay. That's how I'm saying it, because we're triggering the
Okay.
entire thing from the destination back to the source.
Right.
And
Yeah.
how can we verify from I don't know if they have that thing available on UI that we can test the direct transfer works? I mean, the connection from source to that to GitLab.com works.
Yeah, the way we would check that when we spin up the services, if this is actually pretty this is going to get more robust in the future. If you spin up all the services in supervisor and the UI doesn't display, it's because there's a connectivity issue, which sounds a little roundabout, but our validators will run when we spin everything up, and in the event that the connection doesn't work, we'll have a validation problem. And then if it fails farther down, there's other places where it'll stop working. So there's a couple of places to check it, but we need to improve the user feedback for checking that connection. Validate, what is it? If you run the validate configuration, that should help too. But yeah, I'm thinking we can just add the terminal, like a terminal to show like the log output if we want to see how verbose it is. But we'll see where we get to that.
I think well, I'm still trying to understand how this works, because when we use VM, I assume this still use VM, right? So we install the Docker in the VM, and then if the customer's network is in private network, then we usually what we do is ask them to open the firewall to allow VM to connect to their instance, right? But if their instance in private network, then they will open the firewall on their side to connect to the GitLab.com. But if we use our VM, try to test it from on VM to test the direct transfer from the source to GitLab.com, is there any additional requirement to do so? Because I had one project that worked for the customer. When we tested the direct transfer on GitLab.com UI, it doesn't work. I don't know if that makes sense.
No,
Oh,
I get what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, yeah, the connection would be probably the same. There would be the extra requirement if it's like if we're doing a GitHub or a Bitbucket migration, the direct connection between the source and destination needs to happen where the source needs to be able to accept ingress traffic from or incoming traffic from GitLab. So when the customer is setting up the firewall restrictions or firewall rules, they'd allow traffic from the VM so we can trigger all the requests and do listing and all that. And then they would open it up so that they'd accept incoming traffic from like the GitLab.com IP ranges.
So if they open their firewall to allow the VM, to allow their instance to connect to GitLab.com in their network, and then when we trigger the direct transfer from VM, that should work, right?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So it has to be multiple directions. Sorry about that. Oh, dear voice, come back. So you've got the migration VM, right, which has to be able to see their instance list, and it also has to be able to see .com to tell .com start
Mhm.
migration. .com has to also be able to see their instance. So
Mhm.
it's less about the source being able to see the destination and more about the destination being able to see the source in this case. Well, in the case of .com, because you're saying, because what the VM is going to be doing is telling .com, start this migration from this place, and .com will be the one actually then reaching out to that source system and saying, give me data, give me data, give me data. A lot more like what we do with GitHub and Bitbucket, right? So
Yeah. Most network security things, Nikki, allow outbound connections, no problem. What they don't do is allow stuff in. That's not always the case, but it's more often the case. So you
So
don't
in
normally
this
have to worry about
case,
out, you just have to worry about in. So you need, this is normal stuff.
okay.
You would need, the only addition is, besides your migration VM needing a hole in their firewall, GitLab.com also needs a hole in their firewall. Or whatever your destination is, needs a hole in their firewall for the source. Because maybe this isn't a .com, right? So
Yeah, I mean, it could be, yeah, any GitLab destination. In this case, it is .com, but that's what I had to do. I had to open up the security group on our test instance to allow traffic from GitLab.com.
Okay, so in this case, if you should be able to enable direct transfer on GitLab.com to connect to this Congregate, right? If we don't use this UI.
Yeah, direct transfer is enabled by default now on GitLab.com.
uh,
So
GitLab.com does not need access to your migration VM for direct transfer. Is that
Right.
what you're asking?
yeah, that's
GitLab.com would just need to be able to see the source instance. So Congregate is going to talk to GitLab.com and send GitLab.com a request to trigger direct transfer from the source. Does that help, Nikki?
No, I think like Glenn say that then in this case, GitLab.com should be able to connect to, in this case, the Congregate.gl practice management.com. So I'm just trying to understand like if how we verify this direct transfer works.
Mhm.
If so another way, if we able to set up direct connection from GitLab.com to their GitLab source instance, then that means we able to use this UI in the VM because the GitLab.com need to connect to their source instance directly to get the data.
Yeah, I don't
Right?
think you could verify that from .com.
Yeah, the way
You're
you
not a
end up
side
figuring
admin.
that out, if you have everything configured, you list, stage, and then migrate, the migration here will fail and it'll say like GitLab can't connect to, you'd have to
Oh, okay.
inspect the page, but the API call we make would return back saying could not establish a connection. And then nothing would happen.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a good call out. We can definitely add that to the UI if like we are running through instead of it just being like hidden in the Ajax request, if instead it just pops up on the screen saying, hey, by the way, something failed. There's some more user feedback pieces we'll want to add. But good question, because yeah, it's effectively similar to the way we do GitHub and Bitbucket, but it's a little bit different if like compared to how we've done the file-based stuff in the past.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay.
Speaking of those features, I do have one other question or request. That UI looks great and like almost enough. I might consider it. Can you feed it custom options?
What do you mean
So-
feed it custom options?
Well, like right now, I'm testing out the old feature that we used for a different customer to generate reporting on stuff. Would I be able to add arguments in there, like say -- generate reporting or anything like that? Is there any way to do that in this?
In a custom way, no, but I want us to get to a point where the parameters we call from the CLI can't all be accessible from the parameters here.
Okay.
So if the generate issues command, right, like that should just go here. As we build out more support for the old style in the UI, all those flags will become available again. Because the way it's like under the hood, we're calling similar functions, but they're not exactly the same. So there's a couple of different extra steps in the process. But I mean, yeah, that's something that I want to get to a point where we have parity with the CLI options and the UI, and also we're going to refactor the CLI to use the same way that we run Congregate now with the UI. Sounds a little confusing. I'm basically saying we're going to switch to using Click for our CLI instead of docopt, so that it wires directly into the same process here. So if you don't want to use the UI, the newer CLI is going to do functionally the same exact thing.
Right.
So, a lot of back and
Okay.
forth. Okay. Ian, your question, can Congregate connect to a GitLab dedicated instance? Yeah, as long as we can open up the connection between, really the Congregate VM just has to be able to connect to GitLab dedicated and the source instance for the customer. But yeah, there shouldn't be anything that's really limiting that, depending on where we put the VM.
Somebody's already done a migration to SaaS single tenant.
Yeah.
So,
So
or dedicated, but yeah.
Yeah, we did a Bitbucket migration for a customer with Congregate from Bitbucket to GitLab dedicated. So yeah, that shouldn't be an issue.
I'm trying to practice not saying dedicated. It's so hard.
Is it not called GitLab dedicated anymore?
Nope. It's either single tenant SaaS or multi-tenant SaaS.
Ah, okay. I missed that part.
No, it's single tenant SaaS or .com.
Or multi-tenant SaaS.
Right.
If you go look at the post, they said you could refer to it as GitLab.com, multi-tenant SaaS. Don't call it dedicated though. Call it single tenant SaaS.
That's gonna be hard to get out of my brain.
Yeah, seriously. I thought
Such a-
dedicated was a great name.
Yeah, it's such a mouthful too. It's like, I'm doing my 200 words a minute, type it away, furiously, and then, oh, dang, I'm down to like 3 words a minute as I struggle through it.
All right, so the migration did finish, so we'll finish this up real quick and then I'll pass it to you, Vamsi. So
I have another quick question. During the migration, where can we find the log?
yeah, so that's still in the same place when you have it running. Actually, let me just drag it out.
Does that show up in the UI at all?
But not at the moment, it doesn't. But I have 2 terminals.
Fail.
I'm with you.
Oh, so on the terminal, we still can see the log. Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
On the
Okay.
terminal, you can still see the logs. You can go into Flower and look at all the different tasks here, and we can dig into this in a follow-up session.
Okay.
Plenty of data still available to see everywhere, and the underlying piece of the stage data is still sitting in JSON and Mongo, and then I think the results should still be in the same spot. I'll need a double check on that.
Okay, thank you.
But-
I'm good.
Yep. So just to
Oh yeah,
confirm,
that leads into another question real quick. So if you use the UI, are the normal JSON files generated as well, or are they only in Mongo now?
the staging JSON.
Yeah. See,
Yeah,
I clicked it.
it's still those regular JSON files are still there.
Okay.
Yeah. So just to confirm that we got some data over and we retained attributions and all that, we're gonna see a couple of attributions be missed. That's due to what I called out in the presentation earlier. I'm gonna look at the 2 test projects. So left is source, right is destination. Very basic, just to show that we not only did a direct transfer, but we also used the post migration steps. I see we have a variable here on the source that says hello. Destination, we've got hello. This will be one of the post migration steps we have in Congregate. If I look at our environments, there's a test environment on the source and a test environment on the destination. So just a quick A/B there. And then if we go into seed testing, I'm just going to look at issues real quick. Yep. So if we look on the source, we have an issue that Nikki created, an issue that Petter created, and then a test admin. What we should expect to see here would be Nikki and Petter showing up, test admin going to me. The reason why Petter's did not work is because Petter currently has a private profile on GitLab.com. So when we're migrating customers to GitLab.com, and you make sure that I think this, I guess, is a thing we set up in skim provisioning. We would make sure that their emails are public and the profile is public, and they don't change that during the duration of the migration. Afterwards, they can do whatever they want. But mid migration, we need to make sure that the data can be accessed correctly. And that's it for the demo.
And which customer did you guys do direct transfer? Or you're using direct transfer on? That's what Nikki just asked. I
This is
forgot.
a recorded call and there's public people on here. We should not be.
There we have a couple of partners. I don't know if we're allowed to divulge that.
Ah.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Boo. But unfortunately true, probably.
For the public emails, we have a command that sets it on the both, or is it just on the destination?
Should be on source.
Yeah, we can still use the set public emails on source without an admin token. We can't do that. We're going to rely heavily on skim provisioning when we're moving to GitLab.com. I have done direct transfer both to GitLab.com and another self-managed instance. It's pretty much the same. I think the admin token, provides a little bit more workarounds to some of those needs for public email and profile, but like they're very close to lockstep compared to what it was before with the file based.
So there's no current way to make sure that it's public on the destination.
Yeah.
You just have to depend on customers to actually.
It doesn't need to be public on the destination though.
There are some requirements for that. So like Petter's profile on GitLab.com is private, therefore his user attributions don't work.
Yeah.
So
Right,
yeah.
but that's his whole account is private. That's not
Well, that's
him
the weird
missing a
thing. His
public
email is
email.
actually public, but his profile is private.
Right.
So a
Yeah,
little goofy
yeah.
there, but yeah.
I want to make sure of that because I'm going to run into that. So you don't need public emails on destination. What you need is public profiles and not, you need default profiles and not somebody who's gone through and specifically restricted their profile. Is that a correct statement or is that wrong?
So right now I'm operating off the assumption that just from what I've seen, public email and public profile for now. The public email may change in the future. I set everything to public email just to make sure. But I can double check and see if that's a requirement. From what
So,
I've
like-
seen, it looks like that's still required, especially on the source.
Because
The
right now, when you run
destination is-
Congregate set public email, it only does it on the source. It doesn't do it on the destination.
Because we're admin, you can see the primary email.
Yeah,
Right.
so that's the part where it's like we need to make sure some of the data is still publicly available for .com. This is where I think when we're doing skim provisioning, if that's where we'll be able to kind of lean heavily on some of that. But I know we can't do all of those specific settings in skim, but that's
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
So and if that changes in the future, we'll update our documentation, make sure that if we can skip a step that's no longer needed, we'll include that in the runbook. Any other questions before I hand it over to Vamsi to talk about some other delivery kits we have?
Yes, the direct, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah,
Direct
some great questions.
transfer do we have limits the number of project to be able, when we use direct transfer? Because usually we do 200 and now 300, I guess. And then how about direct transfer?
Yeah, the current limit we are looking at for the waves is around 500. We are still trying to find the ceiling, but that's the number we're looking at. To put into perspective, we migrated 30 projects in like 5 minutes. So that's a lot faster than our export import and doing all the post migration stuff. So I don't know if I threw the calculator there. Forget that I'm I'm not sharing anymore, my bad. Thought I was. The paranoia is there.
Is
real.
there now, Michael? So when you say 500, that's just a timing limit, right? That's not like a hard limit of direct transfer, right? It's the same thing we face now. It's just the numbers are a little bit higher.
Right. Yeah. So that's a safe expansion of the current limits we have, but we don't know what the ceiling is at the moment, and we have a couple engagements in flight and upcoming that'll help us better define what the upper limit looks like moving to GitLab self-managed by a direct transfer and to GitLab.com and GitLab single tenant SaaS, all that. We'll find the limit there, but 500 is a pretty conservative estimate, we think, with direct transfer in place. Short of, yeah, we need to find the ceiling, and then there's other places we can pull more performance out for a self-managed migration, but we need to find the best number for GitLab.com.
Yeah, and just to shed some light on that, Nikki, for one of our large customers, direct transfer itself, not Congregate, but direct transfer itself was tested with, I believe it was a 1 terabyte project. So, and it successfully did that. It took a long time, but it was, that was their metric, was 1 terabyte. So,
Okay, so
Oh,
the
so
standard evaluate limits don't apply then.
yeah,
Yeah,
well,
we
that
still
could have been a
have to-
group though. That could have been a group. Like, don't conflate that with, okay, we have these project limits or anything like that. They used direct transfer to transfer thing X over to GitLab.com, and their goal was to get a terabyte of data without errors, and they did.
so that means we don't have limits of the size of the project anymore, or we still do?
There's still some limits in place. So with direct transfer being available, with us stress testing it, we've effectively increased the numbers to some extent of what we think the new limit is, but we're keeping those numbers pretty conservative. We're still operating off the assumption of can't get past the 5 gig limit because of Cloudflare, or 10 gig if you do the AWS S3 import. So we'll still kind of treat it at a similar scope. The difference is we scale up the wave size by 200.
Oh, okay,
And
so
over
that's
time,
500 is gonna be, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say over time, we'll increase the limit. We'll find what the ceiling is, and we'll also update the evaluate output as we find where the new limit is.
Okay, so 500 projects per day, so it's 8 hours business day is the plan. Okay, I'm good.
That's our first untested target.
Yeah. Because we can get almost close to that with file-based, like if we really get creative enough. So to push it to 500 seems just like it's a pretty healthy increase.
And another way to think about it too, rather than the migration method being the limiting factor now, the server settings are going to be the limiting factor, because now so if they're going to .com, you're going to run into the normal limitations of, okay, we can't have a thing over a certain amount. Like, we can't have artifacts over 100 gigs. We can't have, 2,000 branches or whatever. So the limitation is less the method and more the destination now. So.
Okay, I'm sorry, I swear it's the last question. So if we use direct transfer, we don't need the admin account anymore. So that means if we have any engagement with direct transfer, we cannot ask for admin account anymore? Or how that works? Or we still can have request access? Oh, I'm just trying to think.
I would say admin account is still useful. It's just not required now. So, because Congregate has a bunch of value add, it'll do on top of direct transfer that can only be accomplished with an admin token. So
yeah, this opens up the doors for some of the partners on this call to do migrations to GitLab.com without us being involved to procure an admin token. So for us internally, I don't see an issue with us requesting admin tokens for migrations. Glenn can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but yeah, we can still do that. But to keep it still have similar feature parity for partners to be able to help customers migrate to GitLab.com. So it shouldn't change much for you for like your day-to-day, Nikki, like in terms of tokens and stuff.
Okay.
And just going back to that projects question, we're not going to update on the build sheet just yet until we do a few direct transfer iterations. So if you guys don't see it on some of the scoping estimates that you're handed to by the EMs, that's why we're aware. But once we get a more clear idea of the number, that'll start changing and you'll see it.
nice.
Thank you.
Anything else, Michael?
I'm good if there's no other questions. Got 6 minutes, 5 minutes to go through
That's
this.
Well,
perfect for what Vamsi said.
That's more than enough, honestly. It's Friday, it's late. I just want to talk to y'all. So I love that, Mike. So this is probably long overdue, but the practice team is finally putting some initiative into building out delivery kits and run books for all of our services. We know you PSEs and the delivery team in general, it's a little bit of a you have a pocket of knowledge and you kind of learn from past iterations and it kind of lives somewhere in your Google Docs or your repos and there's not really a central location. So we have a major OKR this quarter to, build delivery kits that are usable. And I started with some really light examples, and that's the CI/CD and DevSecOps workshop. So I can show you through the lens of those at first. You probably have not delivered any of those because I don't think we've sold any of those, which is why it was the safest place to start. So just a quick explanation of what those service offerings are. So we have the normal custom CI/CD and security engagements, which many of you have already done before. The lightweight advisory version of the CI/CD and security engagements are called workshops. They're not the most aptly named because they're not just a workshop. It's not simply an essay demoing CI/CD or security features, and it explains this all in the delivery kit. I'm not going to read the delivery kit to y'all, but just wanted to point out that there are delivery kits and they kind of look like this that I'm sharing now, and I'm not going to read all of it. But it tries to map every single thing you need to do for the type of engagement and not just like a list of activities that needs to get done. It's literally all the steps you need to do to deliver it successfully. So I alluded to before, it's not just a workshop. So these engagements, they're advisory, so they're not hands-on. Part of it consists of a workshop. So for example, for the CI/CD workshop, there's a pre-built project demo app, which you would run through, and there's a list of delivery steps to go through it where you do a bunch of GitLab CI work. You build a CI YAML file, you Dockerize and containerize your application, you run some tests, you add some security scans, you deploy to AWS, some basic stuff. Our target customers for these advisory workshops are customers who have no experience with GitLab CI at all. So the idea here is if they have no experience, you can give them kind of a lightweight introduction via demo. And then the real meat of the engagement is after you've completed the demo and you've kind of showed them how GitLab CI works on this pre-built project, there's discovery/road mapping sessions to kind of do a deep dive onto their current state and help them understand the path to adopting GitLab CI, because it's a lot more than just, hey, let's move to GitLab and translate a pipeline. That's great, but there's a lot of work in terms of understanding what their environment setup is, what is their infrastructure, things like that, what tools are they integrating, what container registry are they using, what cloud providers are they using, and so on and so forth. And there's just some steps here, outlining some of the questions and discovery things you can be or you should be asking to customers. I will answer your question in just a second, Mike. I just saw it come through. That's why I paused. So these are here. Happy to take suggestions. These delivery kits, now that there's first iterations, are open for contributions from you all, but are also going to be public for our partners to consume and use and deliver these engagements. So I just want to call that out. These two workshops, again, they're advisory, they're not hands-on, they're also not trainings, right? They're not supposed to show every single feature we can do with GitLab CI/CD because it's a very different type of learning. But this is supposed to be like through the lens of a demo app. Let's talk about now your setup, your environment, your space, and how you can move to GitLab and begin that transformation. So that's the CI/CD workshop. There's the equivalent of the DevSecOps workshop. Again, the lightweight engagement. And going forward, I want to also build out the delivery kits for the custom scope engagement ones. So the longer ones, we're actually hands-on with the CI/CD and security transformations. I know Francis already provided me with a bunch of docs he's written on CI/CD, so I'm definitely going to be stealing a bunch of his wording. But in general, these delivery kits are going to be built out over the next quarter or two, and we're going to be putting a lot more time and effort into these so that you'll have a central singular place to look, contribute to, and everyone can deliver the same thing and everyone's on the same page. So just that was a PSA. I'm reading your comment now, Mike. Can we get actual document templates with word merges and stuff? Absolutely, for every engagement to reinvent the wheel. What do you mean by actual document templates with word merges? Can you just voice your question? Sorry, I'm slow right now.
Just use Microsoft Word and make a document template and have
Oh, like
word
literally
merges in it.
word.
So every time we, so like right now, so when we do a migration, every time we have to generate a migration plan, and every time we get a different document. So, I go ask, okay, who's got the latest template? And a bunch of people volunteer stuff. And then I look at them, they're all ugly, but they all got good bits of information. So you end up chunking together a bunch of them, It'd be nice to have one centralized place where we go get each thing and then tailor it for our needs. And so when I say word merges, so you wouldn't hard code customer names in it. You just have a field in your document, you type a name and it goes and replaces that in the document type thing.
Yeah, that's a really good idea.
And
Glad-
so it'd be way advanced and probably not anytime soon, but like for all your automation you have that generates like all the statement of work activities and stuff like that. It'd be great. Okay, if you have this statement, generate this document in the customer's directory, in their Google Drive directory that gets created with PS projects and all that, stuff like that.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
have a lot of code to do that kind of stuff now. So yeah,
Right.
yeah, we could definitely support that in the future. And yeah, I agree with the building out the templates. We're definitely going through to get more things templated out and available for everyone to review.
No, I love that idea. That's a great idea, and that's the kind of feedback that's going to help us, because we're going to put that on our backlog and focus on this, because we spent a lot of the last couple of quarters working with the EMs and the build sheets and help them speak to you guys and scoping languages, and because they're not always super technical, but we haven't done the best job of working on the delivery kit side. So I want to make these delivery kits that central location and then public for all the partners on the call to deliver these engagements as well. So we're all speaking the same language. So just wanted to announce that. That's all I had. 7 minutes instead of 5. Apologize.
There's one more questions. Nikki, so the delivery kits we just talked about they're like canned repeatable tasks for CI/CD advisory. Yeah, I think what Fonzie was talking about with Francis's notes on CI/CD, I think that would be more related to the discovery template you're looking for.
Yeah, just ping me, Nikki. I can tell you which one. So the CIC workshop has a bunch of advisory stuff, but just depending on how familiar your customer is with GitLab, it's like they would want one versus the other. But Francis has done awesome work as well. I'm gonna probably steal a bunch of what he did and also add it to a new delivery kit. So thank you, Francis.
Fonzie, for that workshop that you just shared, the ideal customer for that is like what kind of organization at what stage in GitLab adoption? Is this for like
Brand new.
So brand new to GitLab.
Brand new, never used GitLab CI.
And sort of planning to build their own GitLab CI, so sort of getting started.
Yeah, getting started. They most likely will have their own, CI system or tooling they're using, whether that's Bitbucket or Jenkins or Travis or whatever tool they're using, but they've never used GitLab CI, so they're not even aware of how it works. So the idea is show them a quick here's how this works on this random pre-baked project. And that's kind of your launching point to talk about, okay, now let's talk about your system.
Right.
And just the deliverable is just, an architecture diagram, some documentation, just to get them to understand what the adoption path is. And then we have the other engagement, which is the transformation engagement, which is hands-on when you're actually in their code and you're building pipelines for pilot applications and whatnot. I still have to build that delivery kit.
If it's not a training, is it your vision that this service would be delivered by us PSEs or by Ian and the education people?
No, this would still be a PSE deliverable, because it's not a training, because we're not you wouldn't be explaining all the ins and outs of like CI/CD syntax. Some of it comes up in the workshop, like you're gonna do like basic rules, workflow rules, and like go through stages and things like that. But the meat of the offering is the discovery portion, the road mapping portion of like, hey, a lot of times customers come to us like, what does it take to get us over to GitLab CI, right? It's not just a lift and shift. It's what we've talked about before. There's a lot of things you need to consider.
And what's your vision for the amount of billable hours or the sort of the size of that? And I apologize if you already answered that.
No, you're fine. This is a fixed price, so this is like super lightweight. So you're not even necessarily going to get the answers to everything. It's just what can you do in, I believe it's 8 days. So you can do the math of what it is. It's listed on our data sheet and everything. So it's
Yeah,
a
awesome.
very quick, lightweight thing. It's not supposed to be like a big discovery. We're working on a separate offering that would be a larger discovery. So yeah, it's fixed price, small for a reason to get customers' foot in the door. And the idea is once they kind of see this a little bit and get our help from our PSEs to what that path looks like, they'll be more incentivized to be like, okay, now we can start doing some of the work and making that transformation.
Great stuff. Thank you.
No problem. Good questions. So yeah, you'll see that. I'll keep y'all in the loop, and hopefully this is helpful too. That's all from us, Glenn.
Great. Excellent QA
That's
session.
awesome.
Thank you. All right. I will ask maybe Michael and Vamsi to take a pass through the notes. Just make sure that the QA parts got documented properly, really quick. Other than that, I think we're done. Yeah. Excellent. Well, if anyone does have any questions, drop a comment in the enablement doc. I think everyone should have that as part of the invite, or send an email to myself, gmiller@gitlab.com, and I'll get that to the right team members. Thanks everyone for joining us today, and have a great weekend. Hope this is informative.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Super.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Take it.
Bye.
Yep.
Bye, folks.